What happens when a duchess walks into a Bravo studio expecting another polished, controlled appearance, solely to find herself face-to-face with a host who refuses to play along? Tonight, Meghan Markle thought she was in command. Andy Cohen had other plans. What began as a light, late-night conversation would quietly unravel into one of the most combative interviews Bravo had ever aired. The lights of the Watch What Happens Live set shimmered against the glossy backdrop as Andy shuffled his note cards. The energy in the room was upbeat but edged with something sharper. The kind of tension you feel before a storm breaks. Andy flashed his trademark grin. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a very special guest. She's been making headlines around the world. And now she's here at Bravo. Please welcome the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle. The applause was polite, respectful, but noticeably restrained. Meghan stepped onto the set in a tailored black blazer and sleek trousers. Her posture was flawless, her stride measured, her smile carefully calibrated for the camera's pleasant but distant. "Andy," she said smoothly, shaking his hand before settling into the chair. "Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here." Thrilled sounded rehearsed, like a line lifted straight from a press release. Andy noticed. So did the audience. He leaned back, swirling his cocktail with practiced ease. "Let's start light. How's life in California? You and Harry settling in?" Meghan answered instantly, her tone polished but edged. "Life's wonderful. We don't really settle, Andy. We create. We build. That's what we've been doing, creating something meaningful instead of just existing." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. Not entirely warm, Andy clocked the dismissiveness, but moved on. "That's great to hear. And how are you and Harry?" "I know the tabloids love to speculate." Her smile tightened. "We're perfect," she said crisply. "Unlike what the tabloids invent daily, we actually have a strong marriage. I'd suggest people stop obsessing over things they don't understand." The audience shifted. The temperature in the room changed. Andy nodded calmly. "Of course. But curiosity kind of comes with fame, right?" "Curiosity is one thing," Meghan replied coolly. "Entitlement is another. The public thinks they deserve access to my life, my marriage, my children. It's absurd." Andy raised an eyebrow but kept his voice even. "Fair enough. But since you mentioned family, your father's been in the press again, saying he wants to see his grandchildren. Do you think there's any chance of reconciliation?" For the first time, the smile cracked. Meghan's jaw tightened. "My father chose publicity over family," she said sharply. "He sold lies to the tabloids for years. He had every opportunity to handle things privately and he didn't. That chapter is closed." The words landed like a door slamming shut. The audience murmured. Andy leaned forward slightly. Still calm, still measured, so there's no chance of him meeting Archie and Lilibet. Her eyes flashed. "I don't reward betrayal," she snapped. "Would you let someone who publicly humiliated you back into your home, Andy? Let's not play naive." The room went still. Andy didn't rise to the challenge. He simply nodded. "I hear you. But some people would argue family ties are complicated, worth preserving." "They can argue all they want," Meghan shot back. "They didn't live my life. They didn't live my reality. And I'm exhausted by people pretending they understand what it's like to be me." Andy took a slow sip of his drink. There it was, the crack in the armor. He shifted gears. "Let's talk about royal life. When you first joined the family, you described it as overwhelming. Some critics say you weren't prepared." Meghan let out a low, humorless laugh. "Prepared? Andy, you can't prepare for walking into an institution that's centuries old and completely out of touch. It's archaic, suffocating. And frankly, I adapted better than anyone could have. The confidence bordered on defiance. Andy leaned in again. And yet, the British public didn't exactly embrace you. Why do you think that is? Meghan's lips curled into something close to a smirk. Because I was different, she said. Because I challenged them. The audience waited. Andy didn't interrupt. And for the first time that night, Meghan realized this wasn't the interview she'd rehearsed. This wasn't a friendly platform, and Andy Cohen wasn't backing down. Asterisk. Because I wouldn't bow and scrape the way they expected. Meghan said, her voice cool but unyielding. And you know what? That's their problem, not mine. A soft gasp rippled through the audience. Even Andy tilted his head, intrigued. He had interviewed countless celebrities, but rarely had someone walked onto a set with such unflinching bravado. The cameras lingered on. Meghan's composed but increasingly pointed expression. Andy realized the first act of the show had already gone off the rails, and there were still plenty of questions left. The tension was just beginning. The commercial break passed quickly, doing nothing to cool the air on set. Meghan adjusted her blazer with precise, clipped movements. Her face unreadable as the countdown ended and cameras rolled. Andy, on the other hand, sipped his cocktail like nothing unusual had happened. "Welcome back to Watch What Happens Live," he said, his trademark grin in place, but eyes sharp. "We're here with Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex. We were just talking about royal life. Let's take it a step further." The camera cut to Meghan. Her smile tight, hands clasped in her lap. "Meghan," Andy began. "Before the palace, before Netflix, before all of this, you were an actress. Suits made you recognizable. From there, everything changed. Do you ever miss that world? The grind, the auditions, the Hollywood hustle." Meghan's reply was immediate, almost dismissive. "I don't miss anything, Andy. I've outgrown it. Acting was a stepping stone, not a destination. What I'm doing now has more impact than playing a paralegal on TV ever could." A collective intake of breath moved through the audience. Andy raised his brows. "Interesting, because a lot of your fans loved you on that show. Some might say it was the foundation that made everything else possible." Meghan let out a short, humorless laugh. "With respect, Andy, my foundation is who I am, not the roles I played. If people define me by a TV show, that says more about them than it does about me." Our condescension was palpable. The audience shifted in their seats. Andy didn't flinch. He leaned in smoothly. "All right. Let's talk about your marriage. Public fascination is endless. You and Harry are global brands at this point. But with fame comes rumors, strain, distance. Are you as solid as you say?" Her expression hardened. "I'm not sure what kind of question that is. Of course, we're solid. Rumors are noise. We don't listen to noise. Honestly, it's laughable that anyone thinks they have insight into our marriage." Andy tilted forward slightly, calm but pointed. "So no truth at all to the reports that California life, media scrutiny, even your own projects have caused cracks." Her icy smile returned. "Andy, let me put it simply. We are stronger than ever. If people need to invent fairy tales to feel better about their lives, that's their business. But our reality is love, commitment, and partnership. Full stop." The audience murmured again, not applause, not cheers, just a low hum of discomfort. Andy let the pause linger, then shifted gears. "Let's go back to your time in the UK, he said carefully. The British public had mixed feelings. Some adored you, others less welcoming. How do you see it now?" Meghan's eyes narrowed just slightly. "I see it as prejudice, plain and simple. People weren't ready for someone like me to challenge their outdated traditions. They wanted someone docile. That's not me. And yes, some of the hostility was rooted in racism. Let's not sugarcoat it. A hush swept across the studio. Andy's tone stayed measured. And yet, some critics argue it wasn't about race, but attitudes that the way you carried yourself, the choices you made, created friction. How do you respond? Her answer was sharp, defensive. That's exactly what people say when they don't want to admit bias. It's not about race. It's about her attitude, Meghan said, eyes steady, voice cold. A convenient excuse. The truth? I walked into a centuries-old system, and they didn't know how to handle someone like me. So they turned me into the problem. Andy's smirk returned, subtle but perceptible. Do you think you bear any responsibility at all? Any reflection on how your approach might have contributed? Meghan leaned forward, the slightest edge in her posture. Responsibility for being myself, for not bowing low enough, for not smiling at the right moment. Please. If being authentic is a crime, I'll plead guilty. The audience let out a soft gasp. Andy swirled his drink, corners of his mouth twitching upward. He'd dealt with divas, politicians, reality stars, but Meghan's arrogance was quickly surpassing even Bravo's usual drama. Okay, Andy said lightly. Eyes locked on hers. Last question for this block. You've spoken a lot about leaving royal life for privacy, and yet Netflix, Spotify, best-selling memoirs, interviews with Oprah. How do you respond to those who call that contradictory? The word landed like a hammer. Meghan's hands tightened on the armrests. Her smile flickered and hardened. Contradictory? No, strategic, she said, tone precise and cutting. We control our story. We share what matters when it matters. That's not hypocrisy, it's survival. Andy nodded slowly, setting down his glass. Well, strategic or not, it certainly keeps people talking. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The tension was thick. Meghan had laid her cards on the table. Defensive, smug, unwilling to concede even the tiniest flaw. Andy, ever the professional, was far from done. The storm was building. The set shimmered in its usual playful colors, but the mood was anything but light. Meghan crossed her legs tightly, hands clasped in her lap, daring Andy to push further. Andy leaned casually against his desk, notes in hand, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. All right, he said smoothly. Let's talk about one of the most famous interviews of the past decade, your sit-down with Oprah. Millions watched. The world was transfixed. Since then, some of the claims you made have been challenged. Meghan's smile didn't falter, but her jawline tightened. I stand by everything we said in that interview. Every word. That was my truth, Andy. Your truth, Andy repeated, swirling his glass. It's a phrase you've used a lot. But here's the thing about truth. Meghan, it's usually just truth, facts, not perspectives. Her eyes narrowed. Are you questioning my honesty? Andy held her gaze, calm, precise. I'm questioning contradictions. For example, you told Oprah you and Harry were married 3 days before the official wedding in a private ceremony. Yet the Archbishop of Canterbury later clarified that wasn't a legal marriage, just an exchange of vows. Do you see how that looks? Misleading. A hush fell over the audience. Meghan leaned forward, voice sharp. What Harry and I shared privately was sacred. Whether the Church of England calls it legal or not is irrelevant. What mattered was our commitment. Andy nodded, though his smile now carried a hint of steel. But you didn't say that to Oprah. You said, quote, we were married before the wedding. Millions believed you. When the head of the church publicly corrects you, that's not semantics. That's a problem. Meghan's nostrils flared. You're twisting it. You sound just like the British press, desperate to pick apart my words instead of focusing on the bigger picture of what I endured. Andy raised a brow, calm but pointed. Let's stick with your words. In that same interview, You claimed your passport and keys were taken, that you were trapped in the palace. Yet records show you attended public events, traveled abroad, even vacationed. How does that add up? A ripple of murmurs swept the studio. Meghan shifted slightly, her composure cracking just enough. Do you understand what it's like to live in a gilded cage? Andy, just because I was allowed to appear in public doesn't mean I was free. Every move monitored, every step controlled. You wouldn't understand. Andy gave a small, humorless laugh. Maybe not. But what I do understand is inconsistency. Asterisk, you've painted yourself as both completely powerless and completely in control, depending on which interview you give. People notice that. Meghan's eyes flashed, irritation sharp. People notice what they want to notice. I have nothing to apologize for. I told my story, and I will continue to do so on my terms. If the public can't grasp nuance, that's their problem, not mine. Her dismissive tone rippled uneasily through the audience. Andy leaned forward, voice dropping, sharper now. So when critics say you've monetized victimhood, the Netflix deal, the Spotify deal, Harry's memoir, they just failing to grasp nuance too. The temperature in the studio plummeted. Meghan's lips pressed into a thin line. That accusation is beneath you. Andy, we've built platforms to amplify voices that have been silenced, to highlight causes that matter. That's not monetizing, that's service. Andy's eyes didn't waver as he swirled his drink. Service that happens to come with million-dollar checks, book sales, and glossy PR deals. Quite the coincidence. Her composure cracked, just a fraction. She leaned forward, voice dripping with contempt. Do you mock every guest trying to make a difference? Or is it just me? Andy didn't blink. I don't mock anyone. I hold people accountable, especially those who hold themselves up as symbols of authenticity while playing by celebrity rules. The audience deserves the truth, Meghan. Not just your truth. A collective gasp ran through the studio. Meghan sat back, flushed knuckles white on the armrests. For the first time all evening, the polished mask of calm faltered. Maybe? A T. Added quietly, letting the words sink in. It's not the tabloids, not the royal family, not Hollywood. Maybe it's you. Meghan's eyes widened, then burned with rage. She opened her mouth, but no words came. For once, the Duchess of Sussex, so controlled and precise, was visibly rattled. Andy took a deliberate sip, letting the silence stretch. Letting the cameras drink in every flicker of emotion. The audience sat frozen. They were witnessing something extraordinary. This was no longer an interview. It was a reckoning. When the cameras returned, Meghan sat rigid, blazer immaculate, eyes burning. Andy shuffled his notes, leaning back. A smirk tugging at his lips, calm, confident, in control. So, Meghan, he began conversationally, we've talked about your marriage, the Oprah interview, your acting career. Let's talk about perception. Many feel you've burned bridges, your father, your sister, palace staff, longtime friends. Why does that keep happening? Her head snapped toward him, tone sharp. Because people sell lies, Andy. They betray trust for headlines or paydays. It's not meetsome. Every single time. Andy nodded slowly, ice clinking in his glass. So the common denominator in all these fractured relationships isn't you? A low murmur swept the audience. Meghan's eyes narrowed. I will not sit here and be psychoanalyzed by someone who profits off gossip. I've spent my life trying to rise above toxic people in toxic institutions. Andy leaned in, razor edge in his calm voice. Toxic people, toxic institutions. Or anyone who doesn't bend to your narrative. Her face flushed. That's insulting. And frankly, sexist. Andy set his glass down deliberately. No, Meghan. This isn't sexism. This is accountability. If you're looking for someone to blame for every broken relationship, every contradiction in your story, maybe it's time to look in the mirror. The studio fell silent. Meghan gripped the armrests, knuckles white. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with fury. "You don't know me, Andy. You don't know what I've been through." Andy's smirk faded, replaced with steel. "I don't need to know you personally. I just look at the pattern. You were a moderately successful actress. You married into the world's most famous family. From that moment, you turned every grievance into a headline, every personal dispute into content. You built a brand not on who you are, but on who you married." The blow landed. Meghan inhaled sharply, eyes wide. "That is absolutely outrageous," she whispered. Andy pressed on, voice booming across the studio. "You call yourself a duchess, but you have no role in the monarchy? You claim independence, yet live off the privileges that title gave you. You say you want privacy, yet you've done more interviews, podcasts, and documentaries than anyone in that family. Tell me, Meghan, what are you without Harry's last name?" Gasps erupted. For the first time, Meghan's control slipped. Tears welled as she leaned forward, voice breaking. "How dare you? After everything I've endured, how dare you reduce me to?" Andy cut her off, sharp, cutting. "How dare you reduce everyone else, Kate? William, the Queen, two villains in your story, so you can play the eternal victim. You weren't pushed out, Meghan. You walked out and you've been cashing in ever since." The camera zoomed in. Tears ran freely. The studio was frozen. "You're jealous," Andy continued, measured, lethal. "Jealous of William and Kate, jealous of the respect they've earned, the love they inspire, the grace they show under the same spotlight you claim nearly destroyed you. The difference? They chose duty. You chose drama." Meghan shook her head violently, voice cracking. "That's not true. That's not fair." Andy didn't flinch. Fair. Life in the royal family isn't about fair. It's about responsibility. And you turned yours into a brand built on complaints, contradictions, and cash. Tears streamed freely. Meghan fumbled with her microphone, shaking hands. "This is over," she said, voice quivering with rage and humiliation. "I will not sit here and be attacked like this." Andy leaned back, calm as ever.